went down the St. James Infirmary. I saw my baby there, sit down on a long white table, so sweet, so cold, so fair. Let her go, God bless her, wherever she may be. She can look this wide looked over, you never find a sweet man like me.
Hey everybody, this is Diane with the long-awaited American Gods podcast, Wednesday's Shadow, and I am joined by...
Hello, this is Kat Kraft.
And this is our first attempt to podcast together, so everybody's just going to have to grow with us. It's going to be just fine. So, Kat,
I'm a podcast virgin. And we're going to talk over each other completely.
I'm going to put you on the spot right away because you came up with the title for the show, and you said something the last time we talked that I thought was right on about how appropriate Wednesday's Shadow is. You were talking about how basically Shadow Moon is truly Wednesday's man.
Oh yeah, they reference that. Actually, I am new to this. I have never seen or, well, read the book. So that title came out of the blue. And since then, they keep referencing him as You're My Man. So that was just a divine inspiration.
Yeah, when you told me that title, because I was messing around with a lot of different titles, I was like, that's the one. That's exactly right. And I've read the book several times, just so people know, and I'll try not to be too spoilery about the book. The interesting thing is, I've read it several times, but I'm having to go back and read it with the series.
And that was my idea for myself, because it's so dense.
Yeah.
And rather than look up things online and other people's opinions, I want to dive into the book. So chapter by chapter, go through it, and then just explore what the mythology that this show is coming from is in the characters.
Which is so cool. It's so layered and so deep. Oh my gosh. So the first episode, so we're a little late to the party at the House on the Rock, but the first episode, season 1, episode 1 was The Bone Orchard, and I just wanted to talk real quick about the meaning of the title. I had to go back and look at this in the book, and it actually is what Loki, who is the guy that shows up to Shadow in the airport and tells him not to piss off bitches in the airport. It's actually what he refers to the graveyard at the prison as. He calls it the Bone Orchard.
Ah.
So, and then when the producers and the writers were talking at the end of the episode, they actually said, you know, it's the world under the world that Shadow gets introduced to in this episode. So that's where the title comes from.
Terrific. I'm going to rely on you for a lot of these facts, especially in the first show. So thank you.
It is all good. We're just going to talk about what we loved. So,
awesome.
You know, I'm going to ask, I'll put you on the spot again. I'll rate first, but I want to know how you rated the episode. It's not quite a 5 for me. I like to rate on a 5 to 5 or 5 out of 5 scale. So it's a 4.75 out of 5 madly executed coin tricks with panache.
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess maybe I'm easy in rating. I rated it 4.9.
Right on.
Batshit crazy sex scenes. Not that made the show, but what bravery, what balls they had to do that. So literally, I guess. So yeah, mine is 4.9 batshit crazy sex scenes.
I have got to tell you that is in like the very first category that we're going to talk about, because that really struck me as a reader of the book and as a huge admirer of Neil Gaiman. It just was so striking to me that they were willing to take that risk. So I'm totally down with that. You rated it that way. Just real quick. So I looked to see what kind of ratings it got, and most people who listen to anything that I work on know that I work on a Walking Dead podcast. So I always Walking Dead has completely skewed numbers for me. So the pilot of The Walking Dead got something like 5.6 6 million views. So I was looking, I was all excited to see how many views this got. And it actually got just a little under 1 million views on the same day.
Wow.
It got 1.58 in Live Plus 7. So that's the people who DVR'd it that they surveyed. But then, Starz is actually saying with the multi-platform, and I think they're probably including people like me who added it to an Amazon account, and I'm watching it through Amazon. They say with the multi-platform views, it got 5 million views. So it got almost as many views as the pilot episode of Walking Dead, except that was same day views for Walking Dead. So I kind of worry a little bit about this show that it's going to be like Preacher. It's not going to get quite the same viewership as Walking Dead because it's so complicated. And I think people might get frustrated.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you're right. I think that it's going to have its just hardcore fans, and I think they're happy so far.
Yeah.
You know, the gaming fans are really happy so far, which is good, which I'm glad to hear. And I'm just, like I said, I'm a newbie, I'm a virgin, and just like orgasming all over. So it's good.
I've got to tell you, again, as somebody who knows this book well, I just feel like they've hit every note beautifully. I'm in love with it. I think they've done a great job. And I think the fact that Neil Gaiman is so involved, he's involved as an executive producer, makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Can you imagine the TV we would get, and the program we would get if they were all like that?
Yeah,
the programming for anything, it would be so rich.
Yeah, if people who are truly that passionate about their product were involved in it, oh my God. Well, we're really lucky,
and if they were allowed to, like Stephen King had no involvement with The Shining and he hated it. So he really didn't have a choice. So it's nice that they have more freedom and choice, and they look to have, the authors involved.
So at the risk of getting too fangirl about Walking Dead, I feel like The Walking Dead kind of set that precedent for current television.
Yes,
I really feel like,
so too.
Yeah, their involvement with Kirkman and their continued involvement with Kirkman, I think, has really set that precedent. And I hope that American Gods continues. I think it will.
I believe it will too, because I believe.
Yes, I can reassure Mr. Wednesday that he has not forgotten.
Nope.
So, just in comparison, let's see. The other thing that I wrote down is two things that were big series and continue to be big series for Starz, which is the network that this is on. Real Housewives of Atlanta and Outlander. The premiere of this was comparable to those. So, that doesn't excite me very much, but I thought I would share that little bit of trivia. Let's see. This episode was written by Brian Fuller, Michael Green, and Neil Gaiman. They all three coordinated on it. And, of course, Neil Gaiman obviously wrote the novel and has written tons of novels and comic books. Brian Fuller is someone who has credits like Star Trek Voyager, Dead Like Me, Pushing Daisies. He worked on Heroes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I thought that the little bit of trivia that was super interesting about him is that his work, and was on his IMDb, usually involves death in some sort of thematic way. Yeah,
like Dead Like Me I loved, and it did not take off, and I wonder if it would now.
Because the tone of TV is different.
Exactly, and I think viewership is too. People are really, just tired of what they're getting, and that's, why they've stepped away from TV.
Yeah. And people are coming back for things like this, and for things like Man in the High Castle. I don't know if you've watched that, but there's just some really quality programming out there that kind of fits a different niche. And I think American Gods is one of those too.
Fits my niche. Scratches an itch.
Yeah. Creates an itch.
Yeah. Well, and warning y'all, I am just a very corny person. I love bad puns, and I can't help the corn, so.
Let's see, the other author, Michael Green. He has worked on Green Lantern. He wrote for Logan. He's worked on Gotham. He also worked on Heroes, so that's his link with Brian Fuller. And he worked on Smallville. So, good creative minds working on this. And then the guy who directed this episode is a guy named David Slade. And his credits include things like Hannibal, which I've heard is very good. I have not watched that yet.
Mm-hmm.
He actually directed Twilight Eclipse, which I thought was funny. And he's known for music videos for people like Tori Amos, Stone Temple Pilots. So he's done a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, well, that makes sense for me. You know why it hits my wheelhouse.
And then I like to do a featured cast member, so I thought maybe we could talk a little about Mad Sweeney.
Okay.
I mean, I kind of felt like, okay, really, Ricky Whittle or Ian McShane probably should have been episode 1 featured cast, but then Mad Sweeney burst into the screen, and Pablo Schreiber was just so amazing that I felt like I really wanted him to be our featured cast this week. So the first thing I learned about him that I didn't know, actually the thing that got me hooked, I didn't realize he was Porn Stash in Orange is the New Black.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's good. And he was great in that, too. Just a whole different kind of character.
He's hardly recognizable. I can see little strains of it when I'm really looking at his face. And my husband's been watching this with me, and he still says, I can't see it. I can't see it. And it's really funny because one of his quotes on his IMDb page says, "My greatest desire as an actor is to keep people guessing and not do anything close to what I did last time."
Well, he's got it there, other than they're both a little shady.
Right. I mean, it's perfect. Let's see. He's half brother to Liev Schreiber, which I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I was saying to you when we talked the other night that I could really when I knew it, I could really see it when he and Shadow were brawling in the Crocodile Bar.
Yeah. I forget what movie it was or where I was kind of cross-referencing that, and I think it might have been Porn Stash, where it just surprised me that they.
There we go. Okay, so everybody, we've been really struggling with this podcast. Technology Boy, Toad Smoking Technology Boy, I hate that little toad smoking bugger, got us again. It just dropped our call, so we're going to pick up where we left off, which is, so you said that you realized when you were looking him up as Porn Stash from Orange is the New Black, that's where you heard about the relationship with Liev Schreiber.
Yeah, and I love both actors, and I really think Pablo has him beat in versatility. I mean, the fact that people don't recognize him and have to go back is awesome.
I think you're absolutely right, because I really like Liev Schreiber as an actor, but he's not always the same character, but he's always recognizable as the actor.
Yes.
And that's totally not true for Pablo.
Yeah, no. In fact, he was in SVU also. He had quite a big role in that.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing between that and Orange is the New Black. It took a while to connect. He was the same actor.
I need to go back and watch those episodes because I just think he's fascinating, and I like the way that he works, and I like the way that he acts. So I'm definitely going to be looking for those. So for fans who might want to look, those are ones where he played a rapist who stalked Mariska Hargitay's character, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a bad man.
Yeah, he's a bad man. Probably his leprechaun is his best side.
This is true.
The only other thing I really wanted to say about him was that he moved to Seattle as a teenager and lived there for a long time, so he's got that cool Seattle vibe.
All right.
I think our farrier must be here because our dogs are freaking out. So people who also listen to other podcasts I work on know that I have a million dogs, so I'm sorry in advance. So let's go ahead and get into the way that we're going to try to organize our show, which is we're going to talk about the light, the dark, in honoring the roles of the gods in this, and then we're just going to talk about the coin trick, which is the thing that blew your mind or blew you away or kind of came out of left field. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What was your light?
We talked about this a little bit, and I can't decide if it's my light or my coin toss, but I was just thrilled and surprised at how funny it was. I laughed so much that it really made my day in some dark days here. So that would be, I guess, my light. that it lightened up my experience, and I was so happy that it had a sense of humor.
I think that's really cool, and I think you hit on something that I love about American Gods in particular, and about Neil Gaiman. We don't deal with death very well. We don't talk about death as a culture. So for this to be so dark, but it to have so much levity, I agree. I mean, I think that was a really cool thing about this episode, and I think it's going to be an ongoing cool thing about this series, is that things that are dark to us personally are going to be things that we get to explore in a different way because of this show.
Yep, that's super important to me. I don't know if this is the time, but I will throw out there that, our society does not deal with death very well, and we all deal with it in different ways. And I can't say I have a lot in common with Shadow. I have not been to prison.
I have.
I have trouble on airplanes. I certainly do there. But my husband also was killed in an accident just in the last 8 months. So when I see it, I love the humor in there. One of the ways I'm dealing with it is finding things ironic and funny, and that's relief. I love it. So it's hopefully y'all won't be offended, and you'll be okay, because there's a lot of humor in there that hits me in that spot. He also did not die in an auto accident with a gentleman's member in his mouth. It was a motorcycle accident. Thank God that's not part of the similarities too. But he's walking into a funeral, and boy, I've done that. So love y'all. Hope you're okay with that humor.
So I think it's cool that we've talked about this off podcast. I think it's really cool that you can see that, and that gives you a valve. I think the other thing is we can both raise an honorary glass to Tim that he did not die with someone's penis in his mouth.
Woo! Well, and he's a corrections officer, so he has been in jail and prison, but just on the other side. But yes, I will raise that glass.
And I just want to clarify, when I say I have been to prison, I worked in prison medical. I was not an inmate, although I'm sure there, but for the grace of the gods, that I could have easily been one.
Uncross your fingers, girl.
Yeah. Well, my light was the Bilquis scene, and I chose it for one of the reasons that you mentioned at the very beginning, which is just that it was so brave of the producers and the writers to take on that scene and portray it the way that it was portrayed in the novel, because it's pretty freaky. A man getting swallowed by a goddess's vagina is pretty freaky.
Yeah.
And I just was in awe that they pulled it off. And the other thing is that I still am fascinated when I listen to the monologue that her partner gives to her when she says, "Worship me." And he just starts saying all of these things, and some of them are beautiful and some of them are a little crude, and it's just, the whole picture of the monologue is just glorious. And I think it recognizes a woman as a whole woman, and Bilquis as a representation of a whole woman.
That's interesting. I had not thought of it that deeply.
No pun intended.
No, that one was out of the blue.
And the other thing is that it really struck me because it was, and the reason that I called it light instead of dark is it's the beautiful but the kind of pitiful way that Bilquis survives, kind of in the corner of still collecting worship and collecting energy. So that was my light. So what was your dark?
Boy, I don't know, it's probably pretty obvious, but with the Techno Boy scenes and not knowing what was going to happen to Shadow. I mean, of course, he's the main character. He was going to survive. But I think some of those issues around hanging scenes and in one of the other episodes, it's another, I think, brave thing they're going to address right now with skin color, with how our society, and particularly right now, is dealing with diversity. So that would be my dark. It was excellent. It was wonderfully dealt with, but it was pretty dark.
So you just brought up something else for me that I really love, and I know that we'll talk about it in an upcoming episode, but Mr. Nancy's monologue at the beginning of the episode where we're introduced to him, and race and diversity and the current conflict in our society, I think you're so right. Again, this show is so brave, and they're so willing to take risks in terms of talking really honestly about hard things. And I thought that there were references to gallows and the noose early on in the show, and then like the lynching of Shadow, because truly Shadow was lynched at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
It's important to the story, and it's a theme that's going to carry throughout the story. But I agree with you. I think that it exposes a darkness that we've got in our culture right now, that we've had all along, but people are for some reason giving themselves permission to talk degradingly about. So I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool element of this series. My dark was a little lighter just in terms of lightheartedness, but I've got to tell you, Audrey Burton was my darkness. So
yeah.
Probably one of my favorite lines from this first episode is where she's pushing Shadow back onto that tomb, and she says, "I'm just trying to get my dignity back here." And I mean, you can completely see how she's trying to get her dignity back, but at the same time, it's so undignified and so embarrassing. And that was one of the things that was really dark for me about Audrey, is that her grief and her anger was so real and so uncomfortable. Her scenes were uncomfortable for me, and I was physically uncomfortable in my body, but you're supposed to be.
Well, yeah, it's an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
I witnessed a lot of anger around losing your partner, because that's part of it too. And thank the gods, I have not had a whole lot of that, but I'm in this new group, this new club where I've seen a lot of anger, and I think there are a lot of women who would have loved to done that scene.
And just the look on her, and not even before we get to that, but like the look on her face in the funeral home where she says to Shadow, "Oh my God, you have no idea."
Yeah. Yep.
And you pointed out that actress was from Nurse Jackie, which I kind of lost track of that series, so I need to go back and watch that, because I thought that actress was perfect.
Yeah, I love that series too. I just love the shows, the prestige shows. But yeah, I couldn't put it together until I looked her up, and until actually the scenes where she was drunk.
Oh,
really I think that's where it triggered it. I'm like, yeah, what has she been in? So yeah, that was fun. I love those connections.
Well, and it sounds like on the episode that's coming up this Sunday, not to get too spoilery, but people are ahead of us. It sounds like there is going to be a confrontation between Laura and Audrey. So that should be really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know much about this, his wife as a character, so I'm going to be going along new with that. I don't know if I like her.
I don't know that you're supposed to.
Well, I'm right on board then.
As someone who, again, has read the books, Laura has a big place in my heart, but I still can't honestly tell you, this is probably the fourth read through now, do I like Laura? Do I love Laura? I'm not sure. I have respect for Shadow's feelings about her, and I think that, obviously, by the end of this episode, his feelings for her are still really mixed, but I think that she was his big love.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, I do. I think that comes up in other episodes, so that'll be very interesting to have that real-life personal part of it come through.
Yeah.
It might be the only part a lot of people can really relate to. Having a love.
I don't know. I think if we're all honest, we all have that place of darkness that we need to explore, and that we can really... It's just part of being balanced. It's part of being balanced as a human being. So I think that's what's healthy about shows like this, or about novels like this, is that it lets us explore that shadow self at the risk of, playing on Shadow's name. But we all have that shadowy part of ourselves that we need to be honest about and honest with.
Right on.
So anyway, that's my bully pulpit. So what's your coin trick? What was the mind-blowing thing for you, or the out of left field thing for you?
I think Bilquis would be the obvious. And what I liked about it is I loved the reaction of people who had had read the book and the fact that they really put it out there. I think the reaction of the men I know was interesting. And at the end, you know, when they have interviews and Fuller, they were talking and they said, how did they reference it? Every middle-aged white man's nightmare.
Absolutely.
So I think that's obvious, but I think the coin trick, really, it's simple, but the severed arm going straight through the Viking, that set it all off for me, and the tone, and I just cracked up. So more power to them when they throw that just corny, funny, lighthearted in the middle of a bloody, horrible scene where everybody's getting slaughtered. Who would laugh during that? I did.
I did too.
I did.
I've got to tell you, by the way, I didn't think about it, but I'm wearing my Viking t-shirt while we're podcasting today. It has a Viking on the back and it says, "You are either on my side, by my side, or in my effing way. Choose wisely." Before I get into my coin trick, just a little thing about the Vikings. So I didn't remember that. When it opened with that, I was like, is this in the book? And it actually, so the book opens with Shadow's story and Shadow finding out about Laura dying and all of that. And then it does the coming to America partway through, but it's pretty true to what they showed us in the series, what they opened with in the series. So I was really tickled to get to that and read that and realize that that really was an integral part of the novel as well. They just changed the order a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they had talked about too how they're going to keep the coming to America in there and how important that is. So that's awesome.
And rereading through the book, I can't remember how much of that Neil Gaiman carries through as a theme in the book. So I'm looking forward to that and seeing how all of that plays out as well. And you already know, and I've referenced it, but I think that the Coming to America where you meet Mr. Nancy is really one of the best pieces of filmmaking I've seen in a long time. Mm-hmm. So
Agreed.
This is exciting. Well, I'm going to have to say my coin trick is Ian McShane. And I admit...
Sorry, I'm grunting because I love that actor. I love that actor. So it was more of like than a.
Well, and I admitted to you that I didn't really have a frame of reference for Ian McShane before this series. I don't know how I missed him. I don't know how I don't have a frame of reference for him, but he is perfect as Mr. Wednesday.
He was Mr. Wednesday before they made this show.
You're probably right. He's probably been Mr. Wednesday for most of his life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he's played roles, too, where he's kind of the central, not necessarily God, but man in control in different odd situations and movies. So I just watched John Wick was on last night, and I forgot that in that role, he kind of plays that, not so much a trickster, but he is the kingpin of the kind of the mob. And not just the mob, but their organization where they come together and they can just be themselves, and they have a lot of rules. So, just a side note on that, going off on a tangent. He's played those kind of roles before,
So admission, I have not watched either John Wick. I need to catch up. But I saw that he was in that and I thought, oh my God, I have to go watch that. Because this actor is just stunning. He's really... Yep. I mean, he's funny and he's dark and he's morbid all at the same time. I love the scene in the airport, which is not really truly the same in the book, where he basically plays a demented little old man and gets himself onto the airplane.
I might try that next time.
Well, and it's funny because I was saying to you the other night, this came out right around the time that doctor got beat up on and knocked out on United and dragged off that flight. So when Wednesday says to Shadow in first class, something like the airlines is the ultimate con game and they deserve to be conned.
Yeah.
That totally struck a note for me because I'm not real fond of flying anyway. I'm not really fond of airlines, which is ironic for someone from Alaska because that's the only way to get out of here. Unless you really want to drive for a long, long time. But
well, I may make that drive to visit you in the future, so I'll let you know.
And then we'll podcast from the same room and the same mic.
Awesome. And then we'll really be crazy.
Right now, we're podcasting 3 hours different. So Kat's in her afternoon, and I'm just kind of scraping through my morning. So, but that was my coin trick was Ian McShane. I just think that they've done such a beautiful job casting this series. I haven't had any complaints about the casting so far, and Ian McShane is like the icing on the cake. Or maybe Cloris Leachman is the icing on the cake. I don't know. She's pretty freaking cool, too.
That was a surprise. But yeah, I think you're right. They all are, as we go. And media.
I know!
I love that I'm watching, and I'm going, who is that? I'm not looking a lot about the actors, but she's beautiful, and she did such a beautiful job that later on to find out who that actress was just, of course it is.
And, I think I said to you that I was like, is that her? No. But it was perfect. And we'll talk about that in that when we podcast that episode. But yeah, I agree with you. I wanted to reference that too. So then, do you just have any... I've got tons of notes about the episode. So do you want to just launch into notes? And we may come up with a more creative title for it at some point.
Yeah. Notes. I have just had some crazy weeks and rewatched it twice, but not recently. So I probably just have stray brain thoughts, just misfiring brain cells about it. So you start on notes and I'll jump in.
That's pretty much what notes are for me. So I just happen to write down the misfires as I see them, usually on a rewatch. And I've actually got someone coming out to spend the night tonight. I'm going to try to force her to watch the first episode with me again. Because I have no life. It's pretty much...
Well, I have no one to force anymore. I mean, like right now. I don't think that my friends would really be digging it so much. And I don't want to force my son to watch it because there are just some scenes that would be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, and he's adult. He's an adult, everyone. So I wouldn't be forcing a 12-year-old or anything, but.
Nonetheless, you really don't want to share the Bilquis scene with your grown son.
No. I if I knew they were coming, I could go get a drink, but. We're both pretty cool. We spend a lot of time watching movies and have similar tastes, but there is, no matter how old you are, there are scenes that you just don't want to watch with your parents or your son.
Yeah, I hear ya. So I guess my first thing then, since they opened with the Vikings, I'll go there first. There were a couple of things that really struck me. I loved that, just that scene of that Viking being filled with arrows like a porcupine. Oh, yeah. Yep. And that was another scene that made me laugh that probably, a normal person wouldn't laugh, but I bet you probably laughed at it too. Oh, yeah. And try describing it to somebody. They will not find it funny. That's just, even my friends with that sort of humor or that know me and that I have that sort of humor would just shake their heads. I also thought it was really cool that Brian Fuller and Michael Green said that they actually created a full-size replica of a Viking ship for that scene. So that you could really have that sensation of them coming to ground and coming through the water. And I thought that was really awesome. The thing that I really wanted to mention was... So I remembered that Odin only had one eye, but I couldn't remember how Odin lost his eye. And as part of them trying to get Odin's attention so they can get the winds to go back to their country, there's that scene where they put out everybody's eye. Well, Odin didn't actually lose his eye. He traded his eye so he could drink from the well of knowledge, which I thought was really interesting. And that is in keeping with some other themes that came up in this episode also. But I thought it was an interesting and creative way to get Odin's attention, and then to find out that Odin didn't really even sacrifice his eye, or didn't lose his eye. He sacrificed his eye for knowledge. That was right. Well, and he did, and all of his men did. They sacrificed their eyes to get Odin's attention. So there's a tiny connection there. And I wrote down, and this is probably not me, it was probably something that I read because I can't imagine I was this witty when I was taking notes, but I wrote, no sacrifice is too great for wisdom. So I think that was probably someone's commentary on Odin's trade of his eye for knowledge, but I thought that was pretty cool. Yep. The other stuff, so in addition to the hanging, which I'll get into in a minute because I thought the symbology or the symbolism of hanging was really interesting. I liked what Loki Lysmith said. They kept mentioning the gallows, and they kept mentioning gallows dirt, and he basically said, this country went to hell when they stopped hanging people. There's no more gallows dirt. There's no more gallows deals. And so I thought, okay, where did that come from? And gallows dirt is something that was used in magic spells. People would gather dirt from beneath the gallows to use in spell making.
Okay.
And gallows deals, there were gallows deals, and there's a story in American Gods where a female prisoner gets impregnated by a guard. That's like his gallows deal to let her go. Instead of sending her to the gallows, he lets her be transported. And he has sex with her and impregnates her.
That's a spoiler for me, I guess. I did not know that. No.
So, I just thought the whole reference
It's just fine. It's just fine.
I just thought the reference to gallows deals and gallows dirt was really interesting.
Well, and I love that you're bringing that up because I did not make a lot of connections with as many as I'm hearing people talk about with the gallows. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, folks, I laughed about that because I also watched Constantine last night, and there was a witch doctor, and they used dust for him to go in the chair and go to the underworld. So when you're saying that, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense now to me in both ways.
Well, and this is getting a little gross, but they said one of the reasons that gallows dirt was considered sacred is because it collected body fluids from people who died by hanging.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so all sorts of body fluids. Blah.
More than I wanted to know right now.
So I'll just go ahead and go into the symbolism of hanging and kind of the idea of lynching. And I think, we agree that Shadow was truly lynched by Technology Boy and his goons at the end of this episode. I'm still not sure. Did somebody cut him down, or did the rope spontaneously break?
I think it broke. There wasn't another person there.
Okay. I didn't get the sense that anyone was there cutting the noose for him either. I totally got the sense that it spontaneously broke. But
I think was there a quote? I think there was something said at the same time, but I did not catch all of these connections with that part. So lead on.
So I looked up the Hanged Man, which is the 12th card in the Major Arcana of the Tarot deck, because the Hanged Man is symbolism that comes up again and again in the book. So we'll see this story again. We'll see this theme again. But this was something I didn't realize. So the hangman is portrayed as a man hanging upside down by one ankle, and he represents self-sacrifice more than he represents punishment or criminality. That was from Wikipedia, but I thought that was really interesting. So here we go again. It's that whole idea of sacrificing yourself or part of yourself. And it says that wisdom, not death, is the ultimate reward for voluntary sacrifice.
Boy, I think that's a quote later on, too.
And so, and that
episode.
And it goes back to Odin sacrificing his eye for wisdom.
And I believe that's a character that has that quote in the 3rd episode. So that comes up again.
Yeah, we're going to continue to see this as a theme. And I don't want to get really spoilery because I don't know what they're going to do in seasons 1 and season 2. This did get greenlit for a season 2, which is amazing. But we're going to see the theme of sacrificing yourself for wisdom again and again. And we're going to see the theme of hanging again and again. So I thought it was really cool and really striking that they just brought it out right off. But Neil Gaiman brings it out right off in the story as well, talking about the gallows and the thing that Loki Lysmith said about, the country going to hell when they stopped hanging people. That's straight out of the book. So they're doing a good job of carrying on those themes. The other thing that I thought about when I thought about hangings is that, we know that the god at the beginning with the Vikings was Odin. Odin is depicted as a hanged god because he hung himself on the tree of wisdom for 9 days. So that theme is carried through. But also Jesus is in some old songs referenced as a hanged god. And I was looking today, and Judas, because Judas hung himself, is also referenced as a hanged god in some mythology.
Wow.
So, and when you're looking at faith and betrayal and all of that, that plays into all of the themes from American Gods, too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I'm sorry. Distraction.
No, it's totally cool.
Maybe that's what I didn't. My mind just floats off on some of it because I can't absorb it all at once.
Well, and I think that's why I watch some of these so many times, is that I see new things every time I watch it. One more thing that I just wanted to say about the image of the hanged man in the tarot deck is that the person who wrote this wiki entry pointed out that the tree of sacrifice is always living wood. The face of the man who hangs, he is entranced. It's not the face of someone who is suffering. So it's the face of someone who's gaining something spiritually, and that it's really about life in suspension. It's not about death. It's about life.
Wow, I did not know any of that. Thank you.
Well, and I had to look it up, and it was really surprising to me to find that meaning, and then to see how deeply that actually plays into what Neil Gaiman is trying to depict in the story.
So there's many layers of meaning on it, for sure.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting, I looked up dream symbolism of hanging, and it's totally opposite. And I don't see this, but if you dream about hanging, you're dreaming about embarrassment or a great failure that everyone can see. And there's references to nooses in this episode too. And if you dream about a noose specifically, it's about dreaming about suicide.
Wow. Yeah, I guess. Well, wow.
So I just,
I'm not guessing. Just wow.
I just thought that I didn't really see those themes. I could see maybe Shadow was having embarrassment because of being an ex-con, but that was the closest I could come to the themes that were cited as far as hanging in dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I really saw it a lot more in the symbolism from the tarot card.
Yeah, I think so too. I that's what I was thinking when you said it. So,
what else? I've got so much. The release scene, the scene where they let Shadow out of the prison and escorted him out. I was thinking that in my year of working in a prison, I've never seen a release. So I think that was probably dramatic. I don't know that it really happens that way. I suspect they probably all just pile them all onto a bus and take them where they're going. But I liked the scene of Shadow being escorted out by all of the different prison officials.
Yeah, I have not. All I've seen is when people get out of jail, they usually sit on the stoop by the sidewalk and wait for the ride.
Right. Right.
My experience with my husband working there and my stepdaughter in the prison, they're just kind of waiting around.
Well, we had a protracted display of that when Shadow was stuck in the airport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He got a lengthy opportunity to sit around and wait for his ride.
Which is no fun. I've flown 4 times in the last couple of months, and can't say that I had to wait or I had to con them to get a seat, but I did have to go through the TSA chose me 3 times out of 4.
Oh, God.
For special treatment, and it got never use a secondhand piece of baggage, folks. It alerted something with the wand, either drug residue or bomb residue, and I got the full treatment. So that was special. Just a little tip. Not related to the show, just a little tip, folks.
No, totally related to the show. Don't piss off bitches in airports.
There you go.
So we both commented on it. The gal who played the desk agent in the first airport was from Men in Black. She played Egger's wife in Men in Black.
Yep, he just put on Egger's suit.
Yeah. I also thought that it was really pitiful watching Shadow just try to get comfortable and try to wait in the airport. I mean, this poor guy's just gotten out of prison. You know what's going through his mind with the loss of his wife. He doesn't yet know that Robbie is dead, but just watching him kind of struggle to get comfortable and wait, that was really, really hard and uncomfortable for me too. It evoked a lot of pity.
Yeah, I'm not sure. it would actually be for me interesting to explore a little bit of that, but being in that place in between finding out tragically that you've lost your partner and then, going to the next process, which for us is a funeral, is that uncomfortable and you don't know what to do. There's just no comfort in it. So that's what, for me, when you're talking about it, it's like there's just this weird spot in there where you're in shock, but there's just no way to get comfortable. No way to get comfortable. And you're waiting. You're just waiting in a powerless situation.
Which is exactly what our main character was going through. I didn't even think about it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, if only McShane would have been there to help me get through it.
Gosh, there's so much more I could talk about. So Bilquis. So I looked her up because I'm pretty familiar with gods and goddesses from different cultures. It's something that's been an interest for me for a long time. But I didn't know this. Bilquis is actually the Queen of Sheba.
Really?
Yeah, I did not know that at all.
Well, and that's kind of interesting in here, too, that the names they're using are not ones that we would recognize. Right. And I like that they don't make it that obvious for the audience.
I will never forget, and I'm not going to totally disclose right now, but a friend of mine who is the person who's responsible for getting me into Neil Gaiman said to me, wait until you figure out who one of the characters is. And when there's more reveal in the television series, I'll mention it again. But it was so glaringly obvious. But the way that the god's name was depicted in the book, it just didn't strike a chord for me for some reason. And then when I realized who it was, when the reveal was made, I felt so stupid that I missed it.
And some of those reasons are why I decided not to read the book, knowing this was coming up and hearing what a wonderful book it is.
Yeah.
And it just was on my list. I never got to it, but deciding not to before this series so that I love a show where I can't figure out what's going on. And this one is definitely that. So
my little sister and her partner are watching it, and I've been talking with them off and on over the last couple of weeks. What do you think? Are you enjoying it? And her boyfriend is totally hooked. He's like, I love it. I think it's great. It's perfect. My little sister hasn't read the book, and she's like, I like it, but I'm really confused. I'm kind of lost. So I think the experience of someone who has read the book and the experience of someone who hasn't read the book, it's interesting that we're both bringing that to this. And I'm going to be really interested to talk more with you once you start reading the book and see what your thoughts are.
Sure. I mean, I enjoy not knowing what's going on because at a certain point in my life, I had to surrender to that, I guess. So finding it entertaining is just awesome.
My little sister is one of those people who will turn to the end of the book before she finishes it so that she knows the ending. I am not. No, I know, isn't that terrible?
Do that.
I am not one of those people. So, I mean, I like knowing what's going on, but I also like knowing that while they're being true to the book, there are some things that they're going to do that are not things that happened in the novel. So I'm looking forward to those twists and turns. Or looking at a reinterpretation.
From what I understand from friends and people who have read the book, they're doing that well.
Yes.
Sometimes shows put that in and it's not done well. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, I think that they're doing a beautiful job just keeping the spirit of the story, but making it new.
Good. Yep.
Let's see. Oh, I thought it was... So I went back and I listened to an interview and did a little bit of reading about Neil Gaiman's experience writing the novel, and he said that he really did stay in all of the places that he depicted. He really did visit all of the places that show up, like the house on the rock will eventually get there. And I looked, and Shakamak State Park, which is that park where Shadow goes and just lets out that primal scream.
Yes.
That's a real park in Jasonville, Indiana.
I loved trying to figure out where he was traveling from and seeing the country. And the House on the Rock episode is going to be hilarious because I am in Wisconsin. It's pretty famous here, or infamous. infamous, I would have to say. And I've never been there. It's wackadoodle crazy from what I understand.
Oh, that's awesome. I haven't traveled a lot outside of Alaska. I've lived here most of my life, and I don't know anything about the Midwest. So seeing that scenery, hearing that the house on the rock is real and crazy is really exciting to me.
Yep. There's so much in this book or in this show that is so authentic. Mm-hmm. And I love that. He could have put that scene anywhere where there was a cliff. It could have gone Hollywood on it. And nope, they're traveling around. He built an entire Viking ship so it would have that feel for us and the actors. Mm-hmm. So it's just a lot of integrity and authentic.
One of the things that I said when I started seeing trailers for the series before it came out was that it looks like they haven't spared any expense in terms of bringing this fantasy into reality. And I still feel that way. I mean, the fact that they would go to the effort of building that ship, that they go to the effort of, they could be just driving down a different street in the same town, but it looks like Shadow is going through this expanse of country.
Mm-hmm. Because he is.
And eventually, well, no, I'm not going to spoil it. Eventually, we should see more of the U.S. and more country, and I think that'll be really, really awesome, too. Jack's Crocodile Lounge, where we meet Mad Sweeney. Mm-hmm. That is a perfect replica of Jack's Crocodile Lounge from the book.
Awesome.
Right down to seeing the teeth lights. I was like, oh my God, they did it! And I love the scene where Wednesday just comes out of the bathroom stall and, strikes up the conversation exactly where they left off. Mm-hmm. He and Shadow.
Well, and, ladies go to the bathroom a lot together, and of course we would not stop the conversation.
I liked that they used mead to seal the deal between Wednesday and Shadow, because mead is considered a drink of heroes and gods in mythology.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to the Norse mythology, too. Mm-hmm.
It cracked me up that Mad Sweeney described it as a drunken diabetic's piss.
I've not had mead, but that was pretty graphic, and maybe it's real.
You've never had...
Don't need to...
Oh, I love mead. Mead actually tastes really good, but you have to like a sweeter drink.
Okay.
So it's totally worth finding a good bottle of mead. Maybe when you come up here, I'll get a bottle of local mead and we'll toast Shadow Moon.
Well, for it to be authentic, I think we need to make it the old Viking way.
Is there blood
and then
involved?
It may be more like what Matt Sweeney would do.
There must be blood and skulls involved if we make it in the authentic Viking way.
Awesome. I know one thing when you had brought up scenery and seeing the country, one of the things that really impressed me was the kind of muted tones in the story. And I kept thinking, what is the red and what is the blue? Because they were very vivid and rich. But they stood out. And that to me, I kept thinking, what is it? And I think as the series goes along, it's more obvious. But it would be, really lush, but more muted and earth tones. And then the red and the blue would pop out. So it's just the cinematography on this is just outstanding.
I'm going to have to go back and watch that. I mean, I could think of places where red was really striking, like obviously during the scene with the Viking melee. But I'm going to have to look at that. And I think it goes, immediately my brain goes to, it goes back to the diversity and the cultural conflict that we're going through right now. That's what I think of when I think of red and blue. Red state versus blue state.
I had not made that. I had never thought of it as red state versus blue state. And they may not have intended that, but how funny.
Right. And that may not at all be but that's immediately where my political brain goes.
Yeah. Well, and some of it was, they're at the hotel and all the colors, it's dark, it's in the evening, but there's some red in there that pops out. So it's those kind of things. It's not just, the red blood. Yeah. And I've heard people talking, it was a little too red and those sorts of things. But I think of course it was. It might not have splashed the correct way. It was a little thin, I think. But so just seeing where it's there. It's in the background. It's a little piece of the story, whether it's a tie or a flower. It's showing up that way. And I think it's getting more obvious as the series goes on, either what it is or there's more of it. So it's more noticeable.
Well, and I just had a big duh moment while you were talking, which is, of course, Bilquis. Everything is red in that scene.
Yep.
So, duh. Maybe I'll have to look up the symbolism of red. I liked the scene when Shadow was driving up to the church for Laura's funeral. I thought that almost had an old country feel to it. I could see, it almost looked like he was driving up to a church in Ireland.
Oh, okay.
I really liked that, and I felt like maybe that was a nod to the old gods and their presence in this story. So
okay, and more of the era where they did that, they reference We Are American Gods, like the title, but it's going from when they came over. Right. So that would have been a period more reminiscent of Days Gone By.
I guess we didn't even talk...
When faith and belief was more important and was stronger, and they're walking up to a church.
And we didn't even talk about it, but I mean, I think you just brought up the central point of the novel, which is that as we came to America as people, we brought our gods and our tricksters and our legends like leprechauns with us. So, yeah. And Charles, I've mentioned Charles DeLint to you. I've mentioned that author to you. He writes quite a lot about that as a thematic idea, that we bring our gods with us. So for anybody who hasn't read his stuff, and I still am going to send one of his books to you, if you're interested in the idea of how we bring our faith and belief and culture with us to different places, he's someone who explores that idea beautifully as well.
Well, and like since then, we've really forgotten our faith and our belief and what we brought over. I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I don't think many of us anymore know about our culture and where we came from. It's just gone. So I don't know what my Scottish and German ancestors would have believed about faith and what their beliefs were. I have no idea. It was probably brought with them when they came over, but it was not carried on through through different generations. So I'm making it up as I go along.
Hence the way the new gods are coming into the picture,
Yeah.
And I mean, we can get into a long discussion at some point, and we probably will, about Wicca and neo-paganism, but, there are a lot of people who will argue that's old faith and old gods, and there are a lot of people who will argue, no, that's new faith. That's a faith that was created in the 20th century, using old imagery, but it was created with 20th century ideas.
Well, and I think both can be true, but the second one probably more than the last, because it's not a tradition that's been carried along like some have. And even you look at Catholicism, it's not what it was, 1,000 years ago. It's changed and grown too, in ways good and bad, I guess.
We definitely bring our gods with us.
Oh, look at her face, folks. She's like choking things down. What do I say? What do I bring to this conversation? That's a whole nother podcast.
So there was my sister is the numerology guru, and I should have looked this up, but Shadow actually specifically says at Laura's grave that he read 813 books when he was in prison. Well, 813 is the year that the Vikings were shown as coming to America.
Perfect.
So I think there's got to be some symbolism there too, but I just haven't. I didn't look it up. So if anybody's listening and wants to share on our Facebook page, which is Wednesday's Shadow, you can find us on Facebook. Please, please, please let us know what the symbolism of 813 or 813 is, because I'd like to know. I found out that Oh, go ahead.
Numbers come up several times, and this show, man, you'll be able to watch it over and over and for a very long time. Right. Because like you're saying, so-and-so's into numerology. So, it's everybody has a little piece of it, and I know nothing about that. So that's something that will continue to be new, no matter how many times I see it. If I choose to go into it that far.
One of the things that I did learn today is that the traditional hangman's noose has 13 knots in it.
Oh, did not know that.
I don't know if that relates to 813 or 813 at all, but I thought that was interesting.
Well, and here's a total tangent, or who knows. In a tradition that actually didn't come to America, that was here to start with. Well, and the calendar actually has 13 moons, not 12, like we have.
I didn't even think about
Shadow
that.
Moon, so that connects another number 13. And yeah.
And the Hanged Man is the 12th card in the major arcana. I'll have to look and see what the 13th card is. But
awesome, yeah.
We see, so Shadow and someone else who's significant in this story are not just the Hanged Man, the 12th man, but they are the product of the Hanged Man as well. So that's how 13 ties in.
That's interesting. I know that part of what was in the book and why they chose Whittle was because that character is kind of supposed to be ambiguous as to his background and his parents. And I know that one of the ideas was that one of his parents was Native American. And I think they have gone a different way with that. But that would be interesting because that would be a culture that did not bring new gods to this land. And maybe that's why they didn't go that direction, because it would just add one more thing that they just chose not to. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but because I haven't read the book. But I know that was one of the things that one parent is black and one parent is of a different place. So in different culture or different, so they had to pick, or they chose to pick someone with lighter skin. Because you tell me in the book how they address that. He
is ambiguous in the book. Okay. But they did bring in the buffalo with the flaming eyes in this first. Yeah. And in the book, they do bring in Native American mythology as well.
Okay.
Which, going back to Charles DeLint, total aside, one of the things that Charles DeLint makes as a part of us bringing our gods is that our gods and the gods of the Native Americans have to figure out how to work it out.
Yeah. And even we're saying Native Americans, and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, we brought the word American here. Right. The original people here do not, they use it because it's what our culture does, but they don't see themselves always as Native Americans. They're Native, but America is what we brought.
Right.
So. And I apologize for what we brought. Anybody else? I don't know how to make up for that, but I do feel bad, and I apologize.
There has to be...
my people brought over some really horrible ideas and things, and I don't think I'll go into it much farther than that, but it's interesting. I think the connection will be nice to watch.
I think Mr. Nancy is going to give us plenty of opportunity to talk about that.
All right, right on.
Yeah. I love the symbolism of Laura's coffin getting stuck as they're lowering it into the ground. It was a really funny, awkward moment, but at the same time, because we know that Laura is going to show up again and again in this story, I just thought it was perfect that she was not as easily buried as perhaps sometimes people are.
Yeah, I did not know that there was any, and I hadn't thought about it that deeply. I just thought it was hilarious and how uncomfortable the whole thing is. Uncomfortable. People there know how she died.
Right.
They all know that, and it's brand new to him. So, of course it's awkward and odd and weird.
And I just want to bring up, trying to keep this relatively PG for the podcast network that we work with. The fact that Audrey said, I told them to leave Robbie's penis where it was. Was really one of my favorite moments. And they do address that in the book. And I was saying to you that I actually think it ended up somewhere pretty unsavory. But I think it ended up buried with Robbie and not with Laura.
Okay, well... I won't tell you what my idea was with it, but it would have gone with Robbie too.
What you really go to that I love is that they catch the discomfort of all of those moments, and they make those moments uncomfortable intentionally. And thank God, because that's real.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that was because in our lives it's an uncomfortable situation and people don't know what to do or say to each other. And of course it's for different reasons there, or, more obvious reasons. But I hadn't thought about that either, that, it does bring up a lot of things that are unbelievable and unrelatable about our culture and our lives and our world, but that's pretty right on. That's pretty straight on that it's uncomfortable no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think it was funny and to have an opportunity for everybody to just, oh, this is uncomfortable, but they have something to point to about it.
Right.
It's, you know.
It is going to be one of those memorable funerals that ever happened in Eagle Point.
Oh, see, and I had no idea where the cities were. I haven't looked that up either, so.
No, that's okay. And, that's me just being snarky. It's not anything that's in the book, but I just think that Robbie and Laura's friends and Shadow's friends and Audrey's friends will never forget that particular funeral.
That's the whole story's going to be unforgettable. And, I imagine that there are funerals where people have those circumstances and don't want to talk about it, but I mean, they didn't probably invent anything there with that part of the story.
Having worked in an ER and having worked in a prison, I suspect you're right.
No personal experience again, folks, but I think that really happens.
The coin that gets pulled into the earth over Laura's grave is going to become more significant. So
yeah, I saw that. Mm-hmm.
I just want to point that out for people who may not have seen that. That is going to come back for us. Media boy, a technology boy. All I can say is that they did a great job depicting him as well. He was so slimy. And I just have to say again, that little toad smoker did not win. We're finally on the air.
Yeah, we were very late, folks, because we could not get things going with Skype, and they were unexplainable why it kept happening. Talking to experts, and of course feeling like I'm a techno dummy. But yeah, at some point it was just like, okay, Techno Boy does not want this to happen, and we're definitely aligned with the old gods anyway. Yes. So, of course.
Yeah, if I had to choose that toad smoker over Mr. Wednesday, Mr. Wednesday would be coming home with me. So.
Yep, I already hated him, but now it's just personal.
Right, I agree. I don't really have anything else. I probably do. I could probably talk forever, but that kind of wraps it up, and we've gone a little over an hour. I do want to just say that there are a couple of podcasts that I've been looking forward to listening to, so I wanted to promote those. Jesse Jackson, who is on Southgate Media, which is the group that we're going to publish with, is doing a podcast called Roadside Attractions, which is an American Gods podcast. And then Jason Kabasi, who we both love, who has...
Hey, Jason. I can't imagine you're listening. But...
He has the Walking Dead cast, which I actually think is how you and I connected originally.
It is, and I'm proud to say I was one of the first 12 listeners for you guys, and have just really loved the additions. Hi, Eric.
Yeah.
Gracie. I'm a weird geek in that I feel like you're my friends and that I know you, so don't judge me harshly. But yeah, and it's how we met, it's how we connected, and it's how I've been more interested in possibly doing this someday. Yeah. So I was a dog walker from way back and have been listening to podcasts and radio, and I won't tell you that, there were devices that were really big and you wore on your hip to listen to when you went running or walking. Look it up, you youngs. But so, I felt like, a lot of the podcasts I listen to and the people on them, have been with me through a lot of walking. And so, hey, Jason.
Yeah.
And Karen. Hey, Karen.
Hey, Karen.
So like you're really going to be listening to me for this long, but I can say thank you to all of you.
So Jason, his wife Jenny, and their friend Mr. Blog are doing a podcast called American Godcast. So now that we've gotten our premiere episode out of the way, I'm going to go listen to the premiere episodes of both of those podcasts. The thing that keeps coming up for me from the book, and I'm a tattooed girl, so I think I'm going to end up with this tattooed somewhere. In the book, again and again, Loki Lysmith says to Shadow Moon, do your own time. Do your own time.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really the lesson that I want to take away from this series is each of us in our lives, we need to do our own time.
Yeah, and I think, too, that it's important for us to not just do that and know that, but to really know other people aren't always going to respect that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm choosing some different paths, and there are a lot of people that don't know me that will think what they want to think about it. And, of course, the people who know me are just like, well, that's unusual, but of course Kat would do that. So, you know, I'm doing my own time.
Yep. And I thought I'd just finish out with a quote from Neil Gaiman because he's endlessly quotable. This is from American Gods. He was no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring because yesterday had brought it.
Terrific. There you go. That's a tattoo too. But beautiful. Yeah.
I'm going to run out of skin eventually.
Nah.
All right. And on that note, thank you, everybody, for listening to our first episode of Wednesday's Shadow. And we will be back very soon to podcast episode 2 and hopefully get caught up.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Thanks, Kat.
Yep. Thank you. And thanks everybody for listening, all 3 of you. And please go to our Facebook page and give comments, light, dark, or batshit crazy. Please comment, give some advice.
And once we get up on iTunes and become available, you can rate and review us on iTunes as well. So,
oh my, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I usually don't look. All right. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
When I die, I want you to dress me in my straight leg shoes. Put a box back coat and a Stetson hat. Put a $20 gold piece in my watch chain. So the boys will know I died standing pat.